Ever get the feeling like you're looking at the world through a specific lens, but you can't really put your finger on what exactly that lens is made of?
It's more than just what we see. It affects how we think, too.
Totally. So, get ready to polish that lens because today we're diving deep into the world of worldviews. We're using this awesome excerpt from Wikiversity's Exploring Worldviews, and it's really got me thinking.
It's fascinating stuff. We're going beyond, like, just opinions and beliefs.
Yeah.
This goes deeper into the underlying assumptions that shape how we interpret reality itself.
And the article really brings up some thought-provoking questions, which I love. It's not just some dry academic paper.
Not at all. It reminds us that our worldview acts almost like an invisible operating system. Like it's constantly running in the background, influencing everything. Every thought, decision, even how we interact with others.
Okay, so before we go any further, let's define worldview. What do we actually mean when we say that word?
Right.
The article describes it as a set of beliefs and assumptions that describe reality, your answers to those big existential questions.
It's like a framework, deciding which questions we even ask.
Whoa, that's a great way to put it. So we're not just talking about, Coke versus Pepsi here. This is big stuff.
Exactly. We're talking about fundamental questions. Does God exist? What happens after we die? Is there a purpose to life? Are we, inherently good or selfish?
Okay, those are some deep questions for sure. And how we answer those, even unconsciously, really shapes how we experience the world, right?
Totally. You know that Anais Nin, quote, "We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are."
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one.
Our beliefs are like filters.
It's true. If your worldview is that everyone is just out for themselves, you might see someone's actions very differently than someone who sees the world as a more cooperative place.
Absolutely. And to really illustrate this, let's look at this example from the article. Imagine seeing the world through the medieval great chain of being versus, our modern understanding of evolution. Huge difference.
Oh, yeah, that was fascinating. Can you unpack that a bit? How those two views shaped entire societies?
Right. So the great chain of being was this rigid hierarchy, ordained by God. Humans were somewhere in the middle, above animals but below angels.
Okay, so far so good.
And this was used to justify the social order. So kings and queens at the top, peasants at the bottom, all predetermined.
So your place in the world, your rights, your worth, it was all decided by this cosmic pecking order.
And then, boom, evolutionary theory comes along, turns that whole hierarchy upside down. We're no longer the pinnacle of creation. Instead, we're part of this huge interconnected web of life.
Sharing ancestors with, well, everything.
Exactly. And suddenly, that justification for rigid social structures, well, it starts to crumble.
It really makes you think, what other assumptions are we holding on to that might be challenged if we looked at them through a different lens?
That's the power of understanding worldviews.
Yeah.
It helps us see past our own cultural programming and really question the truth we often take for granted.
Because what we might think is objective reality might actually be shaped by a specific set of beliefs that we've picked up along the way, from our childhood, our culture, you name it.
You got it.
It's freeing, but also kind of scary, right? It opens us up to new possibilities, but also makes you realize even your most core beliefs might not be as solid as you thought.
And honestly, that's where real growth happens, when we're willing to step outside our comfort zone and really examine different ways of seeing the world.
Okay, so we've established worldviews are powerful, they really shape our reality. But how do we even begin to unpack something that's so ingrained in how we think?
Well, this Wikiversity article, it breaks down worldviews into these different dimensions. Imagine looking at a painting and seeing all the individual brushstrokes.
Oh, I like that.
It's taking our mental operating system
Right.
and examining each component.
Yeah.
And each one has all these different possible beliefs.
Okay, so where we fall on that spectrum for each one kind of makes up our unique perspective.
Exactly. And one that's particularly interesting is human nature. This one's a biggie. Are we, at our core, good, bad, or somewhere in between?
Yeah, that's a question for the ages, isn't it? We see examples of both, right? Incredible compassion and also just awful things happening in the world. It makes you wonder about what's going on deep down.
For sure. And this dimension really digs into that. Think about Thomas Hobbes, right?
Yeah.
He believed humans are, fundamentally self-serving, driven by power.
Right, right.
He said that without, strong rules, life would be nasty, brutish, and short.
Ooh, that's a little pessimistic, don't you think? I'm more of a Jean-Jacques Rousseau kind of person.
Ah, yes, Rousseau.
Hmm.
Believed humans are born good, compassionate, cooperative, all that. He thought it was society that corrupts us.
It's so interesting how these different views, they like actually play out in the real world. Our
Yeah.
political systems, education, everything. Like if you think people are inherently bad, you probably want stricter rules, right? More punishments. But if you see that innate goodness, you might lean towards nurturing potential, collaboration, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. It shows just how deeply these assumptions about human nature, they can really shake the world around us. Where do you find yourself on this spectrum? More Hobbes or Rousseau?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I want to believe in the goodness of humanity. I really do. But then you turn on the news, it's like, makes you wonder. What about you?
It's a constant back and forth, for sure.
Okay, so moving on. Another interesting dimension the article talks about is human will. This is a fun one. Do we actually have free will? Like we make our own choices? Or is it all predetermined?
Oh, this is one of my favorites. This could be a whole deep dive on its own.
Right.
But the core question is, are we writing our own story, or are we just like acting out a script that's already written?
It's like nature versus nurture, but on a like cosmic scale. Do our genes, our environment, do they dictate everything? Or do we have the power to break free and create our own path?
And it gets really interesting when you think about how our beliefs about this stuff, it affects how we behave too. Like studies have shown that if you believe in determinism, that our choices are already made for us, you're more likely to cheat or act selfishly.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I guess if you don't think your choices really matter, why bother trying to be good? That's a bit of a slippery slope.
It is. But then, on the other hand, believing in free will, it's incredibly empowering. Because then you have a responsibility for your actions. You can choose to be better.
It's both a heavy burden and an amazing opportunity, right? Okay, this next dimension from the article is a big one, the nature of truth. This one really makes you question everything.
Right. It's challenging those assumptions about what even is knowledge, what makes something true. Is there one capital T truth? Or is truth, relative?
The objective.
Subjective.
Okay, so like imagine a world where everyone's interpretation of reality is all equally valid. That could get pretty chaotic fast. What happens when those truths clash?
Exactly. This has been a question for, forever. The article talked about, different cultures' conceptions of time. Some see it as linear, others more cyclical. Neither one is inherently more true. It's just different ways of understanding.
Well, that's a good point.
It highlights the limits of seeing just one perspective.
But then, how do we live in a world with potentially conflicting truths? How do we choose what to believe?
Million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And it's why this dimension is so important to think about. If we're stuck on only one absolute truth, we risk being inflexible, unable to see past our own view.
So it's about like being open to the fact that we don't have all the answers, that other perspectives can teach us something, even if we don't agree with them.
Exactly. Embracing the gray areas, the complexity. That's where things get interesting.
This reminds me of a time when, so we've been talking about how these worldviews, they really shape our reality, But how do we actually use this knowledge? What's the next step?
Well, first, we got to admit, challenging those deep down beliefs, it can be kind of tough. Like realizing the map you've used your whole life, maybe it's got it wrong.
Oh, totally. It's disorienting. Like finding out north isn't really north. A little scary, even.
Exactly. But that's where things get interesting. That's where the growth happens. Like compare your internal map to the actual world, right? See where they line up, where they're different, and then you can adjust, navigate better.
I like that. So it's not about chucking the map, it's about updating it. And the article had some cool tips for that whole self-reflection thing, like Socratic questioning that stood out.
Ah, classic. The art of asking why. Not just accepting, but digging deeper. Challenging those assumptions, yours and other people's. Remember that Socrates quote, "The unexamined life is not worth living."
So good. It's like bringing back that childlike curiosity. But instead of why is the sky blue, it's why do I believe this? What backs it up? Am I missing other viewpoints?
Being okay with not knowing everything, that's huge. Intellectual humility, that's where it's at.
100%. And the article, it also talked about dialogue, like actually having conversations with people who see things differently. I'll be honest, those can be intimidating sometimes.
Especially then. That's when you learn the most, though. It's not about convincing anyone. It's about listening, really trying to get it.
Yeah, being open to having your mind changed. Or even if you don't change it completely, at least you walk away understanding more about the issue, about yourself, everything.
That's what this is all about. Exploring worldviews, it's like self-discovery.
Yeah.
Growing your understanding of yourself and the world around you.
Love that. Before we wrap up, I want to bring back that quote from the article. Seek to become unfastened from your worldview and learn to flow among various worldviews that could reasonably represent the full complexity of reality. So good.
Let go of needing to be right all the time. That's where the magic happens. Embracing all the messy, complex beauty of the world.
No one has all the answers, and that's okay. Actually, it's kind of exciting. So, to everyone listening, keep asking those questions, keep exploring, keep an open mind. And until next time, happy deep diving.